Defining and measuring effectiveness in public management. Many of you think that a manager is also a leader, but actually not. A leader is a person who leads or commands a group, while the manager is the person responsible for controlling or administering the company or the organization. These two terms have a different meaning, and they should not be used interchangeably. They both imply unique sets of skills, characteristics, and functions that share a few similarities. They also show differences in some circumstances. Leadership versus management. We can define leadership as a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards achieving a goal or a specific target. In other words, it is the art of motivating a group of people. On the other hand, management is the art of work done through people with the satisfaction of the public employers and the employees. When it comes to setting and executing a company's vision and aims, leaders and managers have a different roles. Leaders are the ones who set the goal, while the managers are the ones who follows it. Most leaders have a clear vision of the positions of their organizations in the future. However, they are not the only person who are responsible of fulfilling the vision. Here, manager plays a significant role. Leaders transfers a company's mission, goal, and vision to the entire organization, and managers are responsible for keeping employees aligned with the core company's goal and values. Leaders are the one who thinks ideas, while the managers thinks of execution. Leaders are looking for improvement in the organization, while managers emphasize rationality and control. A leader always comes up with new ideas and delivers that to a person with a forward-thinking mindset. Basically, leaders look for answers to why and what, while managers look for answers to when and how. Therefore, the manager's primary responsibility to complete their task and reach their goals was based on the leader's vision. Managers' job to make their employees feel free so that they can share their voice. Leaders are concerned with the ideas related in more high level, while managers relate to people according to the role they play in a decision-making process. Leaders' attention is to what should be done to achieve the best result, and a manager's attention is to what and how to do to get done. We also have another concept of definition of leadership and management by John Ketter on 1990. According to the management literature, management is the task of setting up control structures and standard operating procedures, while leadership involves stimulating organizational change by articulating a vision and inspiring a sense of mission. John Ketter has done an excellent job of defining these two concepts. John Ketter observes that leadership and management are two distinct and complementary systems of action. Each has its own functions and characteristics activities. Ketter described two functions that are basic to management. First, establishing and maintaining production system, and second, inspiring people to contribute the effort needed to implement and change work processes. The analytic advantage to separating these two functions is that it ensures that each received separate function-focused attention. Defining management according to Mintzberg. Mintzberg's managerial theory is founded on the idea that managers are involved in 10 roles, divided into 3 main clusters: interpersonal, informational, and decisional. Furthermore, Henry Mintzberg defines the operating efforts of managers in each role. The behaviors of those managers are crucial components for their success. Of course, the 10 roles are inspired by the personal and situational considerations. This is the model of Miss-Birch managerial theory. The first column is consists of the interpersonal cluster, which involves the figurehead, the leadership, and the liaison. Figurehead role, where a manager plays officially the role of a professional representing his organization in social activities and events. The second role is leadership. This role is related to people's motivation and inspiration. As a leader, a manager must coach, support, and guide his or her subordinates. The last role requested from a manager is the interpersonal cluster, to be a liaison and to build contacts with all stakeholders. Managers should oversee networking even beyond the organization boundary. The second column is composed of informational cluster, which involves monitor, disseminator, and spokesperson. Informational cluster includes also very critical roles. Based on these roles, the manager is supposed to communicate, monitor, and distribute the information at all levels. Therefore, the detailed roles in this cluster are the following. Monitor. Managers should ask for information inside and outside the workplace. This will help them to evaluate their department from internal and external viewpoints, discover related problems, and address them in due time. Disseminator. Managers must delegate more when it is appropriate, convey important information, especially to their employees. And the last is spokesperson. As a manager, one ought to transmit information outside the workplace, taking the role of a brand ambassador. The third column is composed of decisional part, which encompasses the following roles: entrepreneur, disturbance handler, resource allocation, and negotiator. Entrepreneur. Behaving as an entrepreneur, managers should encourage change and creativity by leading the implementation of new ideas. Disturbance handler. Managers are responsible for avoiding any disruptions that prevent achieving the needed outcomes. Third is the resource allocator. Managers need to assign and administer a variety of financial, technological, and human resources activities. And the last, negotiator. Surely, a manager is responsible to carry out important negotiations within his department and organization. Manager should focus on two distinct units of analysis. The first is the function of the management, and the second is the attributes of the managers. Managers must perform the following functions. First, learn what the organization is doing. Second, determine the organization needs to do. Third, encourage innovative ways of doing what the organization needs to do. Fourth, deploy incentives to convince the organization members to conduct the activities that the organization needs to do. Fifth, represent the aspiration and fulfill the social psychological needs of the organization's members to the extent necessary to maintain the organization. And last, ensure that the organization accomplish what it needs to accomplish. To perform these functions, manager required the following skills or attributes. First, the ability to listen, to learn, and to distinguish critical from peripheral facts, values, and concepts. Second, a personality that matches the needs of the particular organization's social structure and internal composition, environment, and goals. Third, skills and sensitivity in disturbing resources, deploying incentives, and exercising power. This requires an ability to read people, interpret behavior, act intuitively and correctly, mix the use of emotional appeals, reason, incentives, and one's own power to influence the organizational behavior. Fourth, the ability to identify and achieve appropriate goals. In the public sector, goal setting is often a complex act requiring the manager to juggle conflicting claims and ambiguous policy directions. As incremental theory indicates, sometimes public managers are not trying to accomplish anything new, but simply to keep a bad situation from getting worse. Fifth, the ability to clearly communicate role, task, goals, and missions. Sixth, creativity. 7. The ability to inspire. Defining effectiveness. Effectiveness in management refers to the capability of the management to achieve the desired targets in the specified time. It is concerned with doing what is right and what should be done. On the other hand, efficiency refers to doing the task correctly, timely, and at minimum possible cost. According to Lin on 1887 to 1918, success in public management is a product of the interaction of personality and circumstances. The skillful use of many approaches is cultural, political, symbolic to procedure movement toward personal goals in specific situation. Executives' beliefs and temperaments define and impact direction to ambiguous reality. Effectiveness also requires craftsmanship and an ability to give shape to vague, ambiguous policy environment. To achieve effective management, a manager must be able to influence human beings to act in a desired manner. Effective public management requires managers who are not afraid to take aggressive and even risky actions to overcome constraints and obstacles. Effective management requires defining and redefining the mission and activities of the organizations.
Indicators of effectiveness. These general sentiments are useful in providing a feel for the nuances of effectiveness, but they lack the type of specificity required for research. To provide the type of specificity I am looking for, I will take each dimension of management, its functions, and the attributes of managers and propose indicators of effectiveness, or at least an approach for determining effectiveness for that particular dimension. Indicators of effective performance of management functions. Signs that indicate a manager is learning about what the organization is doing include presence of a management information and/or financial control system, as well as evidence of actual use of the system in decision-making, presence of processes for describing and reporting work, such as regular staff meetings, evidence of informal communication patterns management by a parent wandering around, social events, travel, phone contacts, and the like, evidence of change management behavior in response to information about what the organization is actually doing. Signs that indicate that a manager is determining what the organization needs to do include presence of a process for formulating organizational strategy. This need not, and probably should not, be a formal process resulting in a written document. Evidence of a frequent contact with external parties. For example, other units within the organization, legislators, other executive branch organizations, the media, academics, industry, and interest groups. Documentation or evidence of an evolving strategy in response to changed external conditions. Signs that indicate that a manager has established systems and procedures to ensure that the organization's work gets done and encourages innovative ways of doing what the organization needs to do include presence and use of SOPs or rules governing work processes, a record of efforts to change SOPs, evidence of efforts to change SOPs, evidence of pilot projects to test innovations, and documentation of adoption of new policies, processes, and technologies. Signs that indicate that a manager is deploying incentives to convince organizational members to conduct the activities that the organization needs to do include documentation of methods for describing and assessing staff performance. Again, we're not looking for a formal written performance assessment system. Evidence that the manager understands the specific incentives most effective at motivating particular staff. Documentation of deployment of resources for incentives to encourage, discourage, or reward specific behaviors, such as incentives might include awards, new equipment, higher pay, promotions, extortion, praise, admirations, warnings, and assignments. Signs that indicate that a manager is representing the aspirations and fulfilling the social and psychological needs of the organization's member to the extent necessary to maintain the organization include evidence of high morale among those directly supervised, for example, in terms of staff attitudes toward the organization or staff willingness to interact with other staff and managers after normal work hours for both work and socializing. Data on staff turnover among those directly supervised. There are no quantitative rules here, but a 0% turnover rate and a 100% turnover rate are equally negative indicators of effectiveness. Signs that indicate that a manager is ensuring that the organization accomplishes what it needs to accomplish include data on organizational outputs. Do standard performance measures indicate a relationship between the organization's strategy and its accomplishments? How much of what the organization sets out to accomplish is completed? Evidence that the organization has anticipated problems or otherwise prevented damage to the organization's function or mission. For example, in regard to the organization's media coverage, are negative effectively countered? Are the organization's problem exaggerated, ignored, or accurately reported? If we are to build a body of research on the effectiveness of public managers, we must first study the impact that managers have had on their organizations. The indicators I have just discussed provide a framework for that type of research. I assume that the action of managers are the independent variable and the behavior of their organizations are the dependent variables. However, we must move beyond assumptions and directly study the behavior of managers. To directly study managerial behavior, we must identify other independent variables and seek to explain variation in managerial behavior. The unit of analysis for the inquiry is the effectiveness of managers, not the effectiveness of organizations. Organizational behavior is a surrogate measure for management effectiveness. Indicators that managers possesses the skills needed to be effective. Signs that a manager has the ability to listen, learn, and distinguish critical from peripheral facts, values, and concepts include evidence that a manager regularly changes his or her views in response to communication from staff, evidence of efforts to integrate disparate facts into centered themes or findings, example of incidents in which the manager communicates to staff the organization's core values, and mission, and evidence of efforts to apply these values to organizational tasks and to use them in discarding tasks and information seen as peripheral. Direct observation of efforts to elicit the views of staff. Does the manager dominate all meetings, or are other voices heard? Does the staff feel that their input is considered when the manager makes the decision? Signs that a manager has a personality that matches the needs of the particular organization's social structure and internal composition, environment, and goals include measures of the manager's professional reputation among peers and staff, especially as related to the current job, evidence of support and opposition among the staff, analysis of manager personality perhaps by a Myers-Briggs or similar classification scheme matched to an analysis of the organization's needs. For example, at this phase in the organization's life, does it need an inspirational visionary or someone good at minding the organization's basic nuts and bolts routines? Are these external threats requiring someone who performs well in front of TV, cameras, or would strength as a legislative insider be more helpful? Signs that manager has skill and sensitivity in distributing resources, deploying incentives, and exercising power include measures of the manager's reputation for overall competence among peers and staff, evidence that the manager is perceived as a skillful practitioner. Is the manager perceived as judicious, prudent, timid, aggressive, or a hothead? Does the manager inspire staff and peers respect and admiration, fear and loathing, or calm and piety? Evidence of the manager's ability to correctly predict events and the behavior of people. Does the manager attempt to anticipate reaction to his or her actions? For example, and how often are the manager's guess estimates correct? Evidence of the manager's ability to correctly predict the effect of the deployment of resources on the behavior of key staff. Signs that a manager has the ability to identify and accomplish appropriate goals include evidence that a manager is directly involved in setting goals and directly activities that contribute to their accomplishment. This evidence might include analysis of calendars and formal memos to identify activities related to goal setting and tracking, or detailed case analysis following the articulation of a goal and identification of specific management activities that led to staff behaviors that contribute to accomplishment the goal. Evidence that demonstrate that the manager takes into account the organization's environment and internal resources when setting goals and monitoring accomplishments. Evidence of external support for the organization directly attributed to the direction the manager has set for the organization. Evidence that the manager was able to change the organization's direction and outputs in response to specific external stimuli. Signs that a manager has the ability to facilitate development of systems of work, processes, and to clearly communicate roles, tasks, goals, and missions include analysis of manager's ability to organize and structure work. Does the manager have good skills at planning and organizing projects, measured by means of self-perceptions, staff perception, and documented project plans? If the manager lacks these skills, does he or she have the self-awareness to delegate these functions to someone else? Analysis of overlap of managers and staff understanding of roles, tasks, goals, and missions. Analysis of internal formal memoranda articulating and implementing roles, tasks, goals, and missions to assess the quality of the communication process. Does the staff understand what the manager is trying to say and do? What type of questions are raised in formal communications? Do they indicate resistance, poor communication, or simply a need for more detail? The amount of training and experience the manager has had in spoken and written communication. Staff and peer perception of the quality of the manager's communication skills. Expert analysis of the manager's communication skills. Does the manager have the technical skills in speaking and writing needed to communicate clearly? Is the manager able to compensate for any lack of formal technical communication skills? For example, through more frequent communication efforts, through an engaging informal style, or by using subordinates as surrogate communication. Signs that a manager has creativity include the frequency that a manager's advice is sought when developing new programs, policies, and procedures. Does staff seek the manager's involvement to prevent a veto or to tap into his or her ability to frame creative proposals? Evidence that a manager encourages experimentation to modify established practices. Examples of new ideas that can be directly attributed to the manager. Staff and peer perception of the quality of the manager's creative power. Signs that a manager has the ability to inspire include evidence that a manager makes an effort to communicate his or her vision of the organization and its role in the world. Evidence that a manager's vision is expressed without prompting by members of the organizations, and that is, it is accepted as an important and credible guide to action. Staff and peer perception of the manager's ability to inspire. Evidence of changed organizational behavior that can be directly attributed to the manager's ability to inspire. For example, staff statements such as, "I wasn't too sure this would work, but X says it will, and I really believe in what she says and stands for it, so I did it her way." Studying management effectiveness. Obviously, the concept of management effectiveness and indicators of effectiveness open up a thicket of definitional and measurement issues. My purpose here is not to attempt to conclude a discussion of management effectiveness, but to contribute to a dialogue. I believe that if we are to improve management performance, we must study that performance empirically. However, we should not build a body of research that simply describes and categorizes management behavior, such as scholarship may have its place in less applied disciplines. But in the field of public management, we need to study effectiveness for a purpose. That purpose is to improve the performance of public managers. As workers in the field, we should be very interested in studies that attempt to define what we are looking for in a manager, what I am calling effectiveness, and then assess management performance in the light of explicit criteria. In some sense, this is a retreat from efforts to assess organizational effectiveness. Some evaluation experts, such as Joseph Woolley, have developed practical tools for evaluating organizational effectiveness and for obtaining what Woolley terms is result-oriented management. It is clear that studies of organizational effectiveness and operational indicators of organizational effectiveness have an important place in professional practice and scholarship. In particular, those responsible for running organizations need tools for measuring the performance of the entity they are responsible for. However, In his recent work, Understanding and Managing Public Organizations by Hal Rainey, reviewed the literature on organizational effectiveness and noted that organizational experts emphasize the difficulty of defining and determining organizational effectiveness. Those who set out to study effectiveness soon realize that assessing where an organization does its job well involved numerous technical, economic, ethical, and ideological issues. Studying the effectiveness of an entire organization presents many daunting practical measurements problems, although a number of evaluation experts believe that this task is feasible. An accurate, empirical organizational study must describe a large number of people and their behaviors. Researchers must develop practical summary measures of organizational outputs. We must also seek methods of summarizing the behaviors that lead to particular outputs. I believe that this measurement task can and will be done and assume that the organization will remain an important unit of analysis in public management research.